Well, good evening, everyone. And I'm Dave Johnson, and I've got the good pleasure of being on this webinar with Dr. Gary Lindner. Gary is a PhD physiologist. Gary has been working with multinational, big, huge companies, biotech companies, helping them with research and development. He's been a university professor. He's published lots of papers. I think his real passion, well, of course, is NECAN and helping people, but he's also one of the premier experts in animal reproductive science, and he's just got an amazing background. But I think best of all, Gary, you really are a professor. You really have a gift of taking complex issues and making them not only interesting but vital things compellingly making us want to do something. And tonight we've kind of advertised that this is going to be specifically on water, but it's fun to represent a company that basically is looking at all the aspects that have to do with health, that you can have a dramatic effect on optimizing them to just optimize your health. But Dr. Gary, I'm just going to turn it all over to you, and just excited to learn more from you.
Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I've been with NECAN and an advocate for their self-care solutions here for nearly 18 years. It's more than just a business for me. It's a platform to really make people aware and help them make choices towards a healthier life. It's a mission, it's a passion, it's a desire in me. I had an awesome day today. I met 3-4 new people and sat and chatted with them. Guess about what? Water. And one of them was at a network luncheon, and I kind of picked on the guy because he had a bottle of water with him. And so then I sent him some information afterwards and said, I didn't mean to pick on you. I'm just, trying to help you make some healthier choices. And so I sent him, a copy of a video I show from a documentary called Tapped. And in the email, I also said, I dare you to bring a bottle of water next week to the luncheon. So just kind of, but making it fun and not in anybody's face, but just, providing some good information so they can make healthy choices. NECAN really is on guard for our health. And we are the most advanced self-care company in the world. There's no other company even like that. And when we're talking about self-care or NECAN choice here, it really is a dynamic process, an active process through which we help people become aware of and make choices toward a healthier life. And in the big picture, what we do is we provide that through this vehicle that we call the NECAN Wellness Home. And as an overview of that, what we really do is we use science to provide our body with vital needs, replicating the way nature intended it to be. So for example, we'd all want to breathe clean air. We'd want to have clean, healthy water, some natural lighting of the sun. We want to provide our body and our cells with good nutrition. I read something just the other day that every second we produce 25 million new cells. Now, think of that. I mean, that's astounding, is it not? But if we aren't providing our body with the things to be able to do that, like I just mentioned, air, water, nutrition, good sleep at night, are we going to be able to do that? There's 10 trillion cells in the body. We replace 6 billion of them a day. And we really want to do that. And where the science comes in is providing those things the way nature intended them to be. Not full of toxic chemicals and other things that are going to burden our body and make it very difficult for us to, and I'll say it again, 25 million cells a second. I mean, how many have I done just while I've been talking about it? So it is this is an all-encompassing self-care program. And there's a lot of companies out there that got little chunks of it, little pieces of it. But NECAN's pretty much got it all. And as a physiologist, that's really what drew me towards this company when I started to understand that, to look at really on a physiological level what can happen. I think many times we underestimate the power of some of the things that we talk about. I mean, and we're going to focus on water tonight, but I don't think I have found it very difficult to relate to people how powerful and how good they can feel by doing some really simple things. Just like changing the water that they're drinking. So water really does matter in a number of different ways, and that's kind of a play on word. It matters as to how much we drink, the quality we drink, what our choices for that water is, and it is a thing that to start, I think we really need to enhance our perception of water. Because everybody knows we need to drink water. I think almost people are aware we're predominantly water, about 75% water, but it has a tremendous role in the health of our body. Our blood is mostly water, important for circulation and for delivery of nutrients and for elimination of metabolic byproducts. It's important for digestion, and it's very important for temperature control. In many of my presentations, I use that as an example of how busy our body is. That's the one thing we expend the most energy in our lifetimes doing, is keeping our bodies at 98.6 degrees or 37 Celsius. But so water has a crucial role here. And I think many times people make decisions to drink everything but water, all right? And that's pretty much evidenced by 75% of at least Americans suffer from chronic dehydration, and it will lead to a host of physiological and symptomatic problems. Just a very small drop in hydration can lead to fatigue during the day, and it's the major cause of fatigue during the day. A lot of people experiencing joint discomforts. It's a level of dehydration that is causing that problem in the elasticity and the cushioning for those joints. Many times when we're thirsty, our brain interprets that as being hungry. And so it can lead to weight gain, and also with interruption of digestion and assimilation of nutrients as well if we're dehydrated. Headaches, a lot of times, inflammation that would cause some discomfort, especially in the form of a headache. Can lead to ulcers, high blood pressure, kidney disease. And many times we're choosing things to drink that, instead of hydrating us, are causing us to dehydrate even more. And so we really need to think of water as our most essential nutrient. I think if we look at it that way, we'll have a better appreciation for it, just like any other nutrient. Next to oxygen, it's probably the most important. It is the most important for sure. But it's like, if you ask people how much water you drink in a day, most people don't know. They don't realize it. They just, like I said, they make other choices. So if we want to look at how much water actually we all should drink, it's about half our body weight in ounces. I was on the phone with the gal Julia about a week ago, and she was having some issues with joint discomfort. And she's using a number of our Niken products for that. And she has, one of our Niken water systems. And so I asked her, I said, Julia, how much water are you drinking a day? And she said, oh, I'm probably drinking a quart of water a day. Now, unless she weighs 64 pounds, which I know she doesn't, she's really not drinking near enough water. And then the issue came up with, and she said, Gary, it's hard for me to drink water. I said, well, one, it's not a habit for you. And two, I'll just make this assumption as I'm chatting with her, that when you go to drink water, you take a glass of water and you drink down a whole glass of water. And I said, change your habits to where you have that water with you throughout the day and you're just sipping on it constantly. I constantly have water with me throughout my day. And I need to drink a lot of water because I weigh sufficiently more than 64 pounds, but about a gallon a day. But that's not difficult for me because when I'm even slightly thirsty, I will, as a habit or just a routine, go for the water. I'll pick up the water and take a couple sips of it. And I'm doing that constantly, throughout the day. So again, that's a perception. That's something that people say, I'm not used to drinking water. I'm used to drinking an iced tea or some coffee or a juice or a bottle of sweetened phosphoric acid or a soft drink, if you will. But it's so we really kind of need to change our perceptions, I think, here if we want to be healthier about water and how we do that. And one way too is with choices that we make for water. And here's a few choices. They're common choices, and we're going to go through each of these just a little bit in this presentation. So we have tap water, we have bottled water, we have a number of different types of filtered water, including reversed osmosis filtered water, and well water. So let's kind of look at these choices and what maybe some of the problems may be. And if we're looking at tap water, I mean, the popular press is constantly talking about it. I live here in Lodi, California, and I would say at least 2 or 3 times a month, we have articles in our local paper about problems with the wells and problems with the municipal water system, here in Lodi. And for a lot of people, it is the aesthetics of tap water that they don't like. It's the odor, it's the way it smells, it's the way it tastes. And so they choose not to use or drink tap water because of that. But really what the issue is the harmful things in the water that are a result of water treatment, and especially with halides like chlorine, chloramine, things along those lines. And what happens is when those mix with organic material in water, what it does, it produces these volatile organic compounds, which are abbreviated there as VOCs. And some of those might be trichloroethylene, trihalomethanes, and they really are not healthy choices. You would prefer not to have those in your drinking water if you could avoid it. Here's the other issue too, is that in 2008, the Water Quality Association came out with a statement that said, pharmaceutical compounds were recently detected in municipal water sources. Now, that's not surprising given the fact that we fill 4.3 billion prescriptions annually here in the US. And so, and a lot of times people aren't too concerned about that because they always relate them in very small amounts. But I would be a little concerned because sometimes I'll give you a good example, an active prescription, very commonly used worldwide and in the US, and let's just use the example of birth control pills. And birth control pills are very effective of stopping one of our natural biological functions to reproduce, but they are effective in doses of parts per million. So even though that small amount may not catch your attention, the other thing I would point out too is what is the aggregate total of all those. And that could be, whether we're just talking about pharmaceutical drugs in our drinking or our tap water, or things just in our environment per se, other environmental type toxins, regardless of what the levels are. What are the total aggregate of them, and what are the interactions between those two? So, in terms of water, we really want to try and get rid of those and give our bodies very healthy water. With the prescription drug problem, I think this might be a valid question to ask your pharmacist next time you pick up a prescription, is will this prescription interact with meds already in the drinking water? And maybe you're chuckling, but at the same time, I think that's probably pretty valid with 4.3 billion prescriptions a year just in the US. A lot of people's choices for water is bottled water. And this is a market analysis of just 2014. And I would put this that 11 billion gallons consumed to $14 billion. And that figure is a wholesale figure. I mean, it's more than 75% of people in the U.S. drink bottled water, and 1 in 5 drink only bottled water. So what's the problem with that? One, bottled water is very poorly regulated. There's one person in the FDA responsible for this huge industry. She neither has the time nor the resources to regulate it. A lot of time, bottled water is really just tap water, and sometimes it's run through a filtration process, sometimes it's not. People choose it because it tastes better to them. But in many commercial, blind tasting tests, people choose tap water over bottled water. And I think that's because really you have very little minerals in that filtered water, and our taste buds don't detect it or like it as much when we're actually comparing one to the other. The plastic and the compounds in those bottles are linked to all kinds of health concerns. I would be very concerned about that, especially with BPAs. I think that is probably a sleeper. We haven't come close to hearing the health ramifications of that compound. And I say that as a physiologist, knowing what its structure looks like and how it interacts with different systems in our body. And cost is another factor. Bottled water is 2,000 times more expensive than tap water. Now, let's put that in perspective. Let's say I was going to lunch and I wanted to go to a sandwich shop and get a $5 sandwich. In terms of bottled water expense, I'd have to pay $10,000 for that sandwich. So when you think of it that way, I mean, it really sounds like a hugely expensive choice. And let's look at the environmental and ecological issues, which we don't want to ignore. And that is, we basically utilize 35 million barrels of oil annually to manufacture and to transport plastic water bottles. We use 3 liters. It's a 3-to-1 ratio of water to produce one, same amount of drinking water. So 3 liters of water produce 1 liter of bottled water. And everybody says, yeah, we recycle, but really do we? Basically, only 1 out of 5 bottles are recycled. 4 billion pounds a year end up in the landfills. There are 9 million football size areas in the ocean that's about the size of Texas that are just plastic bottles, and they pretty much last in our environment for up to 1,000 years. So I think this is something that we really need to pay attention to, not only from a health standpoint, but from a health of our planet standpoint too, if we really want to be conscientious about this. So again, we'll look at these common water choices, and what you'll kind of notice there is that these choices pretty much are similar in their characteristics. They're filtered, we have acidic, they're void of minerals, they're not very bioavailable. Whether we're talking about tap water, filtered water, reverse osmosis, bottled water, distilled water, and I still hear sometimes where people say, my doctor told me to drink distilled water. There are not many issues that I know of that probably would be a good choice, and especially for somebody looking for better health and hydration. 15% of our public use well water, so it's not a huge percentage. When I'm chatting with somebody with well water, and I have a well at my place as well, there's a little play on words for you. I'm worried about what's going on around me. I have vineyards across from me. I have somebody that raises cattle on one side. Somebody does, obviously I live in the country. I have a Christmas tree farm kitty corner from me. And pretty much regardless of what they're using in their animal or plant agriculture operation is probably pretty much going to be in my well. The EPA recommends that if you have well water, that you test it at least annually. And I would make the recommendation that you test it seasonally because, compounds differ what we're using in those production methods, throughout the season. So, for me, I really do not consider these to be healthy choices. So Given that, we'd want to look at really what a healthy choice is. What would be the characteristics of a healthy water or a system to produce healthy water? And I think we want to have advanced filtration that meets or exceeds these standards here from ANSI and NSF of 42, 53, and 372. 42 is an aesthetic filtration for taste and odor. Many filtration systems just stop at that and don't go any further. Those would include ones that you could buy at hardwares or big hardware stores or outlets. They basically use one type of filtration with a carbon block filter. It's very effective for aesthetic removal of what we may smell or taste, but very ineffective of removing any of those harmful things that we talked about. That's where standard 53 comes in, of removing those harmfuls, and then 372 is for heavy metal and lead reduction. I'd want to look for a water that has a slightly alkaline, and note I said slightly alkaline, because a pH level of 8.5 to 9.5 is slightly alkaline. pH is a logarithmic scale, which is the same as the Richter scale for earthquakes, and there's a big difference between a 6.0 earthquake and an 8.5. So anyways, but we want a slightly alkaline within those parameters of about 8.5 to 9.5. Our body wants to have minerals in the water. That's how we move water across our cell membranes. If it's void of minerals, we basically need to rob our cells of minerals to go into the water so we can utilize it. And many filtration systems strip minerals from the water almost completely. We'd want to have an energized water. We want to have a water that's highly absorbable. That's where this clustering comes in. And we'd also want a system that's pretty easy to use and one that's easy to maintain. And of course, a lot of times we make our health choices with our wallet instead of our mind. So we definitely want to make it, cost effective so people can make an easy choice there. And I've pretty much just characterized or given you the qualities and the features and benefits of Niken's choices here, which is for our waterfall. That's our home unit. And there's also a picture of the travel unit here, the sport bottle too. So this system really does produce that alkaline water in that range that we want. And you can do that just with regular tap water by pouring it into that unit, let it go through its series of filters, remove all the harmful things, and put things back into the water that our body wants. So again, it's using science to replicate what nature intended water to be. And that's pretty cool. I mean, a little side story here too is, my father spent his whole life in the water quality business and association. And when I first introduced him to Niken's choice or Niken's solution here for healthy water, he looked right at me and said, "This is what we've always wanted. Something to take all the bad things out, but then put the good things back in. And we've never had it." And he was very excited about that. So it's what their whole mission was the whole time of his career, which was 40, 50 years in that industry. So this is an excellent choice. It's cost effective. The water tastes great. I tell people it's the healthiest water on the planet, and I mean that. I really do. It's also very healthy for your wallet. So here's a cost comparison of just looking at some different types of bottled water of what you might invest for your drinking water if you made that choice, as opposed to choosing a Niken waterfall. And once the initial cost of the unit at $249, it's replacement of filters. And you really have an average cost of less than 10 cents a gallon to produce as much of it as you want, as small or as large as your family is. And of course, a larger family is probably going to invest in more filters on an annual basis than somebody just living by themselves. But it's still extremely cost effective to give your body the water that it wants and needs. If you're on go, here you got it. That picture pretty much says it right there. Guy on his bike getting some great water. And here's this bottle I carry with me, all day long. And I'm constantly sipping from it. It stays in my car with me. If I go into a luncheon, it goes with me. Wherever I go, it goes with me. If I'm at home, then I'm using the waterfall. The other thing is it is very environmentally safe and friendly, as the bottle itself is biodegradable. So it's not adding to that environmental challenge and problem of all the plastic in the environment. So healthy water for pennies a gallon. So the other thing we want to address is our bathing. Are we showering in tap water? And some of you may recognize Janet Leigh there from Psycho, and probably the best scream on film ever captured. But we really don't want to be bathing in water that's treated with chlorine or chloramine or other types of halides. And the reason being is that water's warm. We absorb it through our skin very rapidly. We breathe it into our lungs. And according to Dr. Lance Wallace of the EPA, it says it's primary source of chloroform in our homes. So we really would not want to do that if we had a choice. And here's the Lincoln choice: the Primag Microjet shower system. Take all the bad stuff out, remove that. This is, I don't know about you listening to this today, but this is probably one of the products that I get the quickest testimonials from people on, because they install this on their shower and they call me the next morning and say, Dr. Gary, that shower unit's incredible. I didn't want to get out of the shower. That was just that was the best shower I ever took. And I would agree with that too. It is very, very cleansing. It's very relaxing with the massage and the different jets that you have there. But the secret and the trick here really is in the construction of this unit, to where it infuses millions and millions of bubbles into the water. And what that does is increase the surface area, so it's more cleansing. It feels softer naturally. It is just an incredible, incredible shower system. I would highly recommend this to anybody. So, the role of water, very important. People ask me frequently, Dr. G, Dr. Gary, what's the one thing I can do to improve my health? And I said, change the water. Change the water that you're consuming and change the water that you're bathing in. We're 75% water. It just makes common sense to give your body the healthiest water possible. You know, our body can either be the filter, or we can allow some of the choices we make to filter out all those harmful things that are going to affect us down the road. And to me, that's one of the things. I think it's amazing the way people feel when all of a sudden they start to hydrate themselves. That their energy level, just the way they feel on a daily basis, their productivity, if you will, the stiffness they may have, or just other things. I mean, people even saying my eyesight's improved because they're hydrated better and they have a little better pressure in their eyeballs, which affects the cornea and the lenses, everything else. But it's a lot of times this is one of the first things that I give people a choice for. It's something that they're really currently, for most people, spending too much money on if they've chose other systems or bottled water. And the way I see it, and I talk about this all the time, our health is our greatest asset. And if we want any asset to be healthy in our life, all right, we need to invest time, energy, and money into it to have that good asset. And why do we ever think our health's any different? We don't. The other side of that coin is too, with all the money that we can save people, if they make an Ekin choice as opposed to, let's say, bottled water, that's more money for investment into their health as well, for self-care. So very, very common sense choices. This is a slide that I first introduced at a presentation. Dave, you were there. It was in Seattle. And the reason I did it there was that the attendees at this presentation many of them had medical backgrounds, and health-related backgrounds, because the people hosting it had that type of background. And I showed this slide up on the screen, and I asked the audience, I said, what are these symptoms of? And we put the microphone out in the audience, and a lot of people gave response after response of chronic diseases. Time over and over again. Well, that would be indicative of that chronic disease, or this chronic disease, or that chronic disease, which is probably true, but it is also symptoms of just simple dehydration. So here's a way that you can make a choice to be healthier, to implement self-care, implement an active wellness program, if you will, by choosing healthy water. These are the 3 products that we talked about. I suggest you get back with the person that invited you onto this presentation and talk about this choice, and make a choice, take a step, take one thing to help produce, to help give you probably the most essential nutrient that we have. And again, I will reiterate, start to think of water that way too. Progress yourself through that with a self-care program. I love that this is what I do. Just sit and chat with people about, things that they may have concern about, to give them maybe an awareness or a little different way of looking at it, and then offer them choices so they can be healthier. So this presentation was about water, and I'll give you some coming attractions. So on March 10th at 8 a.m. Pacific, a very good friend of mine and somebody extremely knowledgeable in this subject will talk about air matters and why what we breathe and affects our health too, and some choices that we can make for better self-care and healthier lives. So with that, Dave, that's the presentation for this evening. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I enjoyed presenting it, and thank you very much.
Gary, I appreciate that. And just looking at the air, also the water that you just covered, you said something profound that might be worth saying again, that if you don't have a filter, then you are one.
Sure.
Also, when you were showing that slide with those myriad of symptoms, I think it's really strong, the case that you could build, that a lot of people have a deficiency of water, and yet it would seem really silly to go to a doctor and talk about these problems, and they put you on a prescription and then ask them, is this a deficiency disease of not having enough whatever drug?
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind, Gary, you've been using Niken for quite a while, which only has side benefits and no side effects. Would you mind just maybe closing with your story? You went in to get a checkup, and you made the doctor.
Well, let me start with what you just mentioned too, and I'll use that call I just had with Julia about a week ago, the gal with the joint issues. And the first thing I asked her really is how much, I said, Julia, I know you have a Niken waterfall. I know you made a good choice for healthy water. How much are you drinking? And, and she told me a quart. That's probably, and I don't want to say how much because that'll give Julia's weight away, but that's not a good thing to do. But anyway, it was probably a third of what she should be drinking on a daily basis now. And she also expressed to me, I think I need to go to my doctor because this really isn't helping as much as I want. And she'd already been the route of cortisone injections to reduce inflammation and things along those lines, which are just temporary fixes, really. And had she gone to her doctor, I have no idea, I have no doubt that he would not have had a conversation with her about how much water she drank a day or put those two things together. Because in his mindset, he has this medication or this treatment, okay? And you almost have to wonder, if you were to extrapolate that, how many times are people going to their doctors with symptoms that are basically just symptoms of dehydration or poor quality sleep, or maybe just not getting enough direct sunlight a day, 20 minutes of sunlight a day for vitamin D3, and then being prescribed medication when there's a much simpler solution. And that's what I love about self-care. That's what I love about this movement, this mission. It's a very trendy subject right now, and people are looking for solutions. They really are. So the story that Dave mentioned is one that I went to. We recently changed healthcare providers, and moved to a different provider, to Kaiser basically, and went for a checkup because they request you to when you change the provider. And I go in the office, and they first thing they do is hand me the form to fill out before I see the doctor. And so I'm filling out this form, and the lady hands it to me, and halfway down the page, it says, list the medications you are currently taking. Now, first of all, it didn't say, are you taking any? It didn't ask me. It just asked me a directive to list the ones that I am taking. And I found that different than last time I'd been to the doctor. And there was like 20 spaces there, blank spaces for me to list all these medications. So I got up, took the paper up to the receptionist, and I said, I have a question about the medications, listing medications here I'm taking. And she didn't even look up from her computer. She just said, oh, honey, don't worry. Here's another sheet to fill the rest of them in. So 20 wasn't enough, all right? And if you look at that in the statistics, it's pretty much close to not enough, because the average person in the U.S. is on 12 different medications. I mean, if you take that into account with the 4.3 billion that are filled. So anyways, I said, no, that's not it. I don't need more space to list more medications. I don't take any, I'm not on any medications. She abruptly looks up from her computer right at me and repeats what I just said and says, you aren't on any medications? You're 64 years old. You aren't on any medications? And I said, no. She goes, well, just leave it blank. So, I wait a pretty long period of time, an inordinate amount of time, if you will. And then I'm, escorted into the examination room, and the nurse comes in and looks at my paperwork and says, Mr. Lindner, I think you forgot to write down the medications that you're on. And I said, I'm not on any medication. I don't take any medications. And she says, you're not on any medications. And just about then the door opens and the doctor hears this. And he pulls his glasses down, looks at me and looks at my chart, looks at me, looks at the chart, paperwork, looks at me and says, you aren't on any medication? I said, no, I'm not. And then I said something I probably shouldn't have. And what I said was, no, I think 4.3 billion a year in the U.S. being filled are enough. I don't think I need to add to it. So regardless, I don't think we got off on the right foot there, but I couldn't help myself, because to me that is abhorrible. But I am very happy to be part of an organization, a passion to help change that. I think we have the tools to where we can really start to decrease, if not eradicate, most chronic disease in our society, not just here, but globally. And, very proud to be associated with you, Dave, and many other people on this call to help that come to fruition.
Gary, thank you. We have a better way. Thank you so much for sharing it. Take care, everybody, and catch you on the next call.